So after Biden walks off then, Amanda Gorman comes up and she gives a pretty decent poem.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. And the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president.
We just gotta stop. I just gotta stop at this point. So for those of you who don't know, again, she's a poet laureate. This is supposed to be a poem, by the way. She's recited. This is all a poem. This is what's known. I was introduced to this concept in college. This is what's called slam poetry. This is basically poetry for, oppressed minorities, historically oppressed groups, to basically rant and whine about how oppressed they are.
That's an actual genre of poetry?
Yes, slam poetry, that is actually a thing. And you're seeing this young black girl literally already preaching about the systemic racism and inequality in America. This is literally the kind of stuff you would see on a college campus. The inauguration of the next president of the United States has become a literal college campus, folks. That's where we are at this point.
I didn't realize that was an actual genre of poetry, because it sounded like she had watched Hamilton and she was trying to mimic the way that they did the rapping poetry in Hamilton. I didn't realize this was an actual genre. But one thing that stands out about the part we just played is she mentions this is a nation that isn't finished. And this really plays to the ideology that they believe. And when I say they, I'm talking about the black nationalist wing of the Democratic Party, and now the Democratic Party as a whole. They don't see the United States as a nation. They see it as a work in progress. See, from our perspective and our ideology, or our philosophy, if you will, we believe that the nation became a nation in 1776. Now, you can improve a nation, but that doesn't mean that you're continually creating the nation. So you create is like a person is born, and that person grows. The person isn't growing into a human being. They've been a human being since birth, if you believe it, at conception, and since conception. But they've been a human being all along. They're not continually evolving into a human being, and this is the way they view nationhood. They view the United States as this entity that's becoming a nation, rather than a nation that is slowly or even quickly improving itself. And this is, again, you can't have unity with this. This isn't an ideological difference. This is a total philosophical difference that cannot be bridged.
Only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can...
Our future first. She said put our future first. Whose future exactly is she referring to, by the way?
That's a good question. That's a really good question.
Reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew. That even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever be tied together, victorious. Not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promise to glade the hill we climb if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it.
So she's talking about repairing the past. I mean, first off, I'm pretty sure that's by the logic of, unless time travel exists, it's impossible to repair the past.
Well,
you can't repair the past.
You can't repair the past, but it just shows how she sees, and again, this isn't just her. There's a whole ideology behind this that's behind the Democratic Party. They see the American past as broken. We see the American past as glorious. They see the American past as evil. We see the American past as something to emulate. And this is something that cannot be bridged. You can't have unity in a country when half the country looks at the past as evil and half the country looks at the past as glorious. This is a bridge that cannot be fixed.
These are two different worldviews that cannot coexist with one another.
Correct.
We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy.
Okay, so this
delaying
is
democracy.
So again, this is something else they believe. They don't believe we're a country. They believe we're becoming a country. They don't believe we're a democracy. They believe we're becoming a democracy. But whenever you run through the Capitol building like a bunch of wild savages, they say that you're defiling democracy. But wait a minute, I thought we're becoming democracy. So according to Gorman, we're not yet a democracy. Where she's claiming that people are trying to delay democracy in the suggestion that we haven't yet achieved democracy.
And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked,
rhyme, like really forced rhymes that aren't even really rhymes. Again, because once again, this is supposed to be poetry, people. This is like modern art. This is the kind of quote unquote poetry you get from colleges these days, when black studies majors are running around and are considered, it's considered a legitimate school of thought in American academia today.
How could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert. How could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy.
Did a 3-year-old write some of these rhymes? I'm sorry. This is just, again, this girl received a Nobel Prize for poetry? Are you kidding me? As an English minor, I minored in English, folks, to sound a little bit bougie here. Yes, my minor was in English. I read a lot of great English literature, Shakespeare, some of the great American authors like Herman Melville. And to see how far literature has fallen in the English language is just very, very depressing. It makes me very sad.
And change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the wind-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it For there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
We will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. Look, I mean, I don't really want, this is, again, you can't have union when half the country wants the country to create a wondrous world and half the country wants to create a wondrous America. I want to raise this America into a wondrous country. I don't really care much about raising the wounded world into a wondrous world. And the imagery she uses at the end, this could have very easily been written by a young Bolshevik poet in Russia 100 years ago. This is another reason why there can be no reconciliation between the right and the left in this country. There is no golden dawn that we can create on this sin-filled earth full of sinful people, and anyone who tries will always turn into a tyrant. Anyone who tries to create a new world and heal the world will always turn into a tyrant. So this is the furthest thing we want it to have, anything to do with, especially we don't want anything like this anywhere near the halls of our government.
I want to take this moment to essentially kind of metaphorically throw holy water on a demon here. I'm going to counter this horrendous abortion of the American language with some actual literature. Thank you very much. The antidote to this, go read Ralph Waldo Emerson's The American Scholar. That is a truly great speech about what it means to be an American thinker and an American intellectual, given, of course, by one of the great American intellectuals, Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I will also, I just gotta say, I will counter this. This is my holy water here. You ready? I'm going to counter this with something that is very simple, but is a piece of some of the greatest literature ever written in the English language. You may recognize this excerpt. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper. All right, I'm done. My bougie side is done. I can go back to being that guy with a podcast now. I've shedded my degree. I'm back to being that guy with a podcast.
Yeah, well, so I did a little bit of background research on Amanda Gorman. She seems to be a bit of a black ethno-nationalist, which I would call ethno-narcissist. You can't really blame her. I mean, she is extremely talented. I won't take that away from her. But so her mother, this is from the Harvard Crimson. It says the Gormans trace their creativity and activism to their mother, talking about Amanda and her sister. They trace their creativity to their mother, who only let them watch 1940s sitcoms like The Munsters and The Honeymooners, one of which includes a character that Gorman cites as the first feminist TV icon. So in order for them to watch anything other than the 1940s sitcoms, they had to tie that to social activism. So in other words, if they wanted to watch a modern movie, they had to explain to their mother how that movie ties into social activism, and then their mother would let them watch the movie. So imagine you're growing up, you're a kid, and you're only allowed to watch 1940s sitcoms, black and white sitcoms. And if you want any other entertainment, you got to study social activism, social justice movements, and tie that whatever you want to watch to those movements. I mean, yeah, I can see myself becoming ethno-narcissist activist if that's the kind of childhood I had. This is almost like whenever someone's want their child to become a master violinist and they beat their fingers with a ruler if they make a mistake. That's basically the way this poor girl was raised by her mother.
Yeah, I just, like I said, there is a reason that I did not watch the entirety of the Biden inauguration with the volume on, but it still just made me very, very sad to realize that there really are that many people, a sizable amount of people who believe this crap, who actually have this outlook on America right now. And the worst fact of them all being that now people like that have Joe Biden's ear as president of the United States for as long as he is president, until sooner or later something happens, which you know it will, and we're going to get Kamala Harris as president, and that's going to be 10 times worse. But we're going to be here for all of that. Regardless, we're going to get through. We're going to get through the storm and the wrong. We're going to get through the thick and the thin. We will rise up. Allow me to get a little slam poetry here. We will be the phoenix that will rise up from the ashes of the oppression and rise out of this endless shadow, this endless night, this endless darkness. Am I doing it right, Jacob? Is this slam poetry done right?
You're getting close. You're not quite as good. You're not quite as good as a person of color, but you're getting close.
I need to brush up on my poetry. Then I'd really be able to take him to the cleaners. All right. Until next time, thank you guys so much for listening to this special edition of The Right Take. We will catch you next time, guys.